Ancestral Tengrist Strength by Dzvera. Author's Notes. Ancestral Tengrist Strength is a mini-book which is started in 2014 and finished in 2016 for the musical album bearing the same name. It's strongly inspired by the history of the Bulgars and pagan/nomadic Eurasia, as well as some uncommon old music, Tengrism, animism, totemism, and nomadic shamanism. May the story carry you on a magical adventure to the ancient, sacred lands of Eurasia. Also, big thank you to all of my friends who have supported me throughout the years. Without you, Dzvera would not have come this far. Glossary. Kut means spirit. Yurt means home. Kam means shaman. And Bagatur is the highest ranked of a seasoned Bulgar warrior. For more information on Tengrism, words you don't recognize or anything else, visit www.tengrism.wikispaces.com. It's a Tengrist wiki for beginners, or just contact me on the email dj_dzvera@abv.bg or on social media, and I'll be happy to give you insight and answer your questions. Special thanks to Oliver Meads and Jamie Charlie for helping with the recording of the black metal and dark ambient respectively, and also to Nicola Getzo for producing the artwork of the album. Many thanks to all of you for your interest. Don't forget to be awesome and never stop being curious and looking for the next adventure. Stanislav Dzvera Flesher of 2016. Prologue. Dawn was calmly approaching, and the smoke coming from the dying embers of the fires inside the yurts in the settlement was becoming visible. The wind was slowly picking it up, carrying it over the steppe, where it slowly mixed with the fog that was forming around the nearby river. Everything was peaceful, and everyone slept. The only couple of things that could remind one the time itself had not stopped were the cracks of the burning wood that could be heard around, as well as the odd sound of a little critter or a larger beast from the wilderness outside. There was one more sound. The steady breathing of an aging woman who was sitting at the doorstep of her yurt and was calmly watching. The Great Mother was restless. She was sensing a great kut moving around. There was a small object with a humanoid shape in her lap that was made out of wood. It was a protective doll totem. It was said that those dolls totem were asleep during the day, but then, at night, they would awaken and guard the yurts and the settlement from evil spirits. The woman had made many such dolls over time, although she was only given the title Great Mother fairly recently, the spiritual leader and the voice of the great Sky Father Tengri in the settlement. Now she had joined the totems in their watch, anticipating something other than the dawn. Dressed up in thick leathers, she was shielded from the chilling night wind, and although her face and hands were exposed to the harsh weather, she was calm as a resting doe, for she had seen many harsh winters before, perhaps more than anyone else around. Although the land was resting beneath a snowy blanket, the worst time of winter was already behind, and spring was on its way. Looking up at the somber sky, she exulted. The wind was carrying the great clouds through the sky as they were making their slow journey through the Sky Father's realm. The crystal skies cleared beyond them opened. All of a sudden, a bright light enlightened the frozen steppe. A globe, bigger than the other stars, yet nowhere near as big as the moon, was radiating in the sky. An omen. Very well then, thought the Kam, ever so calm as she continued her watch. The light from the celestial bodies almost reflected from the eye sockets of the dolls, making their rough features look even grimmer than they already did. She could still sense the movement of the silent force that traveled over the land. The kut was nearby. All of a sudden, she started sensing movement around the settlement as well. Someone had woken up and was up to something in the cold winter night. The Kam's yurt was up on a small hill on the side of the settlement, providing her with a view of the entire region. She continued to watch and listen. Great Mother! Great Mother! A voice broke in the silence of the night. She could make out a silhouette coming her way from the nearby yurts. Great Mother! Continued the voice. Avithol's wife is giving birth. He has summoned you to tend to his newborn. Without uttering a word, the cub rose from her doorstep. She turned around and placed the dolls on the doorstep next to one another, like warriors on watch, so they could oversee the settlement and the nearby steppe. She then faced the young man in front of her. He was barely of age and wore a beard that had just grown up properly. The lights from the single globe above almost bathed in his eyes. The old woman gave him a nod and started to steadily make her way down. He answered with a quick bow out of respect and turned back towards the yurt of the leader of their clan. Shortly after, they had made their way down the small hill and were now facing a great yurt, 3 times the size of all the others. This was the home of the chieftain of the settlement as well as their court. A few others had now gathered outside. Upon seeing the Kham, they all made way for her immediately. She entered and walked towards the private quarters of the family. Upon entering them, she saw a young woman lying in furs, looking exhausted. The man of the yurt had started a small fire, and the whole place was warm. A drop of sweat ran down the forehead of the young woman as her elder approached the bedding. There was a newborn child in her hands of the woman, now a young mother too. The baby was fair-skinned as the snow outside, with a bald head. The great mother carefully took the child in her hands. She was a little girl, and something about her just radiated power. The great mother closed her eyes, and the world around her just ceased to exist for a few moments. This was where the great hood had gone. It was as if the spirit, the Heminja of someone great from the past, had been sent by Tengri himself from the sky realm throughout the cracks of the grey clouds, and as the soft light enlightened the world through the night, so the Sky Father enlightened the hearts of the family and the whole settlement. You have a beautiful girl, Vladoya. Your husband will be proud, that much I'm sure of. The voice of the Kham finally spread around the yurt. Calm but distinct, it was heard by everyone in and everyone out that was nearby. Have you chosen a name for the young cub? We have not, Great Mother. We wanted you to see her and grace her with the Sky Father's blessing before anything else. Is all good? Will she be good? Asked the mother. Yes, my friend, all is good. There is something special about this one. The spirits favor her. She will be worthy before Tengri, replied the Kham. Avithal entered the yurt, carrying a pot with fresh water. Upon seeing that his consort was well but exhausted, he had rushed out to get fresh icy water from the refreshments for refreshments and washing. He brought the pot next to his wife's bed and carefully poured some into a wooden bowl, after which he handed it to his beloved. The Kham was still holding the child, gazing deeply at her. She will be called Zurnitsa, the Great Mother finally said, for she was born under the light of the morning star. May she forever shine as bright as her patron. May she grow to be graceful as a swift fawn, determined as a she-wolf, caring as a mother bear, and wise as a great owl. May her strength fail her never, uttered the Kham, as she carefully ran her palm down the little gentle face that was calmly facing her. With a hearty smile, she turned towards the great chieftain and handed him his daughter. Without saying another word, she turned around and headed out. When she reached the exit of the yurt, the Kham reached into a small pocket in her furs and got out one of her protective dolls, which she then carefully placed near the exit. Now that she had ensured that the newborn was well and blessed and this yurt was well guarded, the elder turned towards the few people who have gathered outside and said, The Sky Father has blessed Avithal and Vladoya with a wonderful daughter. She is well and blessed. Today is a good day, my friends." A few people smiled and bowed before her out of respect, acknowledging what had happened inside. The Khan bowed to them in return and then continued on her way to the small hill. Not long after, she was at her own doorstep again. She turned around and sat next to the guardian totems. The first rays of the sun were now shining upon the summits of the high mountains to the east. Soon it would go over them and spread its warm rays upon the land. The stars were becoming dimmer, slowly disappearing one after another, giving way to the morning light. Yet the single bright globe was not giving way yet. "Grow strong, little one. Become a lovely damsel, and make us all proud and happy, O light of dawn," thought the Great Mother, still smiling. Suddenly, something caught her attention. There was a band of black clouds coming from the other side of the great mountain. The Khan looked around and could see them to the southeast as well. So far, far away, and yet so close. Something did not seem right, for those would not occur if all was well. A frown crossed her face, and she could sense the sorrow in the lands beyond. She knew that soon she would have to speak with her leader, for her people would have to make preparations to brace themselves. The tides of darkness and war were approaching. Chapter 1. Tides of Darkness and War. 20 warm summers passed since that dawn. 20 dark winters engulfed the land, bringing rebirth and vanished away. The eternal cycles of life continued undisturbed as it had done since the eldest remembered. The people migrated with the seasons and lived in harmony with the land. A few brave ones had ventured outside of their domain and had heard stories of great cities with walls as thick as a whole yard, with lands where many lived differently, without moving as much. Sometimes travelers from such lands would pass through their land, but they quickly disappeared, for they did not seem to like it much. Life here was different. There were few, if any, buildings, but not like those that were described in the tales they had heard from the distant lands. The people were still hunters and gatherers, and their whole settlement was mobile. They could disassemble the yurts and put them on their basic wagons, which were pulled by horses, the sacred beasts of the steppe. They made settlements in the valleys around the rivers, and they had always kept their tradition and their old ways of life, no matter where they went. When harsh winters were coming from the north, they would go to the land down south and would make settlements there, while performing rituals to chase the evil spirits away and pray to the Earth Mother for a good year. Soon enough, when their cold was cured and the harsh winter was over, they would go north again, where it was cooler. The most important thing was to let the land recover. The settlement could be established again to the north, and they could hunt and gather with respect to the Earth Mother, while southern lands recovered the same way for when the next harsh winter comes. The door of a yurt opened, and from it a young woman jumped out energetically, gracing everyone around with a beautiful smile. The others around quickly picked up her energy, and even the sun, Koyash, seemed to be smiling back at her. The cool wind from the north playfully ruffled her hair a little, but she managed to straighten it with a little tilt of her head. The long golden hair gracefully fell down her black back again as she went to a shed nearby to get a carrying pole and a couple of buckets. It was early morning, and it was time for her to go to the nearby river and get some fresh water for her family. Carefully placing the carrying pole on her shoulders, she went on her way, but her cheerful spirit not changing for a second. "Uncle Sundoke!" shouted out the golden-haired girl when she saw a familiar face near the riverbed. "Are you well? What are you up to this morning?" she continued as she was nearing the riverside. "Oh, hey there, Zori!" answered a tall, well-built man who was watching his two horses drink some fresh water before going to work for the day. Dressed in rough leather, the man stepped closer to meet Zurnitsa. "You're not wasting any time in the morning, eh? Good girl. How's my brother doing?" he asked as he took the carrying paw off her shoulders to help her out. "Oh, he's doing well, but restless. He's meeting others about an important meeting. That's all I know. You know how he's like with those things," explained the charming damsel as she strode to the edge of the foreshore and carefully dipped one iron bucket sideways into the river. The heavy pail disappeared into the water immediately. Without hesitation, the girl pulled it back up carefully and placed it on the solid rocky ground next to her, without spilling. "I hope it doesn't take him a long time. I was hoping we could go archery together," she continued as she did the exact same thing with the second bucket. "Oh yes, he is a busy man, as every good leader who cares for his clan is. Don't worry, he knows his fatherly responsibilities, just as he knows what's expected of him as a chieftain. He will find time to shoot with you. I can take you hunting with me. He will approve, that much I know," added the uncle, giving her a smile as he patted the horses on their backs. "That would be great, uncle!" exclaimed Zurnitsa, as she took out a second full bucket and attached both the carrying pole. "I best take the water back now. Mother is probably waiting for it," she said with a little bit of urgency. "Very well, Zori. Let me help you with that," returned Sundoke as he lifted the carrying pole and rested on her shoulders carefully. "I'll be getting back to the settlement myself to prepare for my hunt. You can meet me there." "Great! I'll come to your yurt very soon," said the happy lass, turning back to the settlement, not wasting a second more. Her uncle made a clicking sound with his mount, signaling the horses. Then he got up on one of them, a well-nourished white stallion, patted the other on the back, and headed back himself. Zurnitsa came back in no time, eager to go into the vast steppe with her uncle and embrace the hunting ways of her people. She quickly left the carrying pole where she got it from, and she carried the full buckets back home. The lass was greeted by her parents, who had already started performing their daily duties. Vladoya was now working on some levers that her husband had brought from a hunt. She was stretching them over a wooden framework so she could tie them properly, clean them up, and then start drying them. Avitaho had to hold court today to consult with everyone else about problems and important matters, and was just casually observing everything around, clearing his mind from anything that could cloud his judgment and perspective. "I've brought the water," said Zurnitsa, and carefully placed the buckets at one of the corners of the yurt. "Uncle Sudoku said I can go hunting with him today, if I want to. Could I go?" she asked, hoping for the best. "As much as I don't want you being a hunter, my brother can teach you a few things that will be good for you to know. Although I would prefer you being here and mastering the lever working with your mother, it'd be best if you're not around today. Off you go with Sundoke. I'll see you tonight," said the lord of the clan, and gently patted his daughter on her head. Vladoya nodded her approval, with absolute trust in her husband's decision. "Thanks, see you tonight," immediately responded Zurnitsa. Wasting no time, she turned around and left the yurt, heading to meet her uncle. 50 steps later, she was outside her uncle's yurt. He was saddling the two horses who were about to carry them through the vast grassland. A few steps from him stood a huge saker falcon. The sides of his eyes were covered up, so the bird did not suffer from stress caused by the surroundings. Sundok had been well versed in the arts of falconry. He had picked up this bird of prey when it was only a chick, and he had raised it and trained it to be a great brotter in hunt. Falconers would traditionally spit in the mouth of the chicks when they first get them to strengthen their bonds between them. Then they would train them with a wooden whistle and would teach them to strike at a marked prey when signaled to. Traditionally, a falconer would hunt with the same falcon for 7 summers, and then the bird had to be set free, for its service was done. Such was the pact between the two hunters. "I had no doubt you'd come," said the cheery uncle, as he was patting the thick protective leather wrist that covered his lower half, the right arm. That way, the falcon could stand on his arm without piercing the human's flesh with tiny knives at the end of his toes. "Father did not have anything against it. He is happy that I'll join you today," replied Zori, and went to pat one of the horses. "I see your hunting companion is ready," she added, gesturing at the falcon, who was now turning towards her and was eyeing her. "Ah, yeah, Sauki has been a good brother in hunt for a long time now. He soars silently, carried by the winds, then strikes true every time. He has earned his keep for a lifetime," said Sundoka as he was equipping his hunting dagger and bow. "Another summer, and I'll set him free, for his service shall be completed. Then he will soar free in the sky realm of Tengri." "Do you have a spare bow, uncle? I did not ask father for one." "He has taught me how to shoot, although not on a horse," said Zori, still comforting the horse, who appeared to enjoy having his mane stroked. "Sure I do, good girl," returned the seasoned huntsman. He went inside the yurt and came out a moment later with a smaller wooden bow. He himself carried a large recurve bow on his back that was nearly as big as Ornitza. "Now let's be on our way. It's hunting time," he continued while mounting on his horse and passing her the weapon. "We have to act, Vituho. Time is of the essence, and this trouble will not go away. The tides of darkness are coming from both sides, and they will be at our settlement in no time. They will threaten our lives and our whole way of existence. We cannot sit and wait for that to happen." The words of a Bagator were echoing from the acoustics of the huge yurt where the meeting was held. A small fire was burning on the center around it. A small group of adults sat around discussing issues. Avituho had brought in the High Kam and the oldest seasoned Bagator in his settlement for a consultation. The three of them were standing around the fire, exchanging thoughts and experience, sharing concerns, trying to find solutions. It was a harsh time for all settlements in the land. Travelers from the southeast spoke of the ambitions of the southern people, who were different, looked loathsome, and had desires to rule the entire land. The people who lived to the northwest of the great mountains had met them before while traveling around, but they were not very friendly and fair to their own, let alone outsiders, so the nomadic people tried to avoid them. The true threat was their newfound religion of dishonesty, trickery, lust, and Sodom that was coming from the deserts to the southeast where they lived. Like snakes in the sand, they were ugly mongrels with swine blood who were trying to divide and conquer all that is and would be. Their mad ambitions drive them ever further outside of their territories towards the steppe, and they are not going to stop willingly. They are dishonorable warriors and horrendous terror from the desert lands that is a threat to our people. There will be a fight. Our kin must prevail," continued the veteran, shifting his gaze between the leader of the clan, the Great Mother, and the burning wood, all around which they were all sat. "I have felt their foul energy and have heard of their insane beliefs. We must ensure that they never bring this shadow of decadence to us," the old Kam said slowly. "You've heard that some of our own people have captured their scouts around the southern borders of our domain. They said that they tried to use trickery and deceit. In their eyes they saw their sinister spirits. Our warriors killed them, burned their bodies and their camps, chanted for days to be certain that no trace of them had blighted the sacred earth. The Khazars have been tainted with the sickness, and they are marching forth," she shook in discomfort. "Friends from the southern settlements have told mean that our scouts have noticed armed men nearing our domains already. It won't be long before they enter the steppe. We shall encounter them and soon and must prepare ourselves for the worst, advised the Bogatyr. I agree with you, old friend, Avituko grimaced at the thought of the advancing tide of darkness. And I share your discomfort, great mother, he continued, tossing another chunk of wood into the fire. Preparations will begin tomorrow. We shall be ready to act if they come within our territory. Great mother, you will summon your own, for we will make an offering tomorrow night. As for you, brother-in-law, you will spread the word to all the men here. Tell them to stay ready and sharp, for their strength may well be tested soon, finished the Vitho, his facial expression easing a little. Very well, chieftain, said both the Bogatyr and the Khan. That was the end of the meeting, and both of them stood up and turned around, heading outside to carry out their work. Avituhel went out with them and bid them swift work. After that, he did not go back inside immediately, but just stood outside and watched. He observed them, taking their separate ways and speaking with others. He observed the settlement becoming a bit more active as moments slowly passed. Finally, he looked up at the steppe that could be seen past the yurts, the vast, beautiful, untainted grassland, but most importantly, the darkening skies above. Yet another unnerving sign of what was coming. The tides of darkness and war were marching forth. Chapter 2. Ancestral Tengrist Strength. There should be foxes in this area, pointed out Sundoke as he observed the area atop his mount. It'd be great if we were able to kill a couple today. Furs are always needed, continued the man. The falcon, who was now resting on his slightly stretched out arm, cocked his head, as if agreeing. Zrunitsa quietly rode beside him. Her father had taken her out with him many times before since she was child, and over the years she had learned now to make noise that would scatter the beasts around. The punishment for chasing away the prey was starvation. The rules were harsh, just as the land often was. However, everyone accepted that, for hard life was what kept them strong. Everyone shared the belief that surviving through the constant difficulties was good, and one of the reasons why they were still alive. If you live comfortably all the time, you get soft and vulnerable, the elders said. Many of the men went out during winters dressed in only basic clothing and carrying a knife. They exposed themselves to frosty winds and snow to harden themselves. During the warmer season, especially when traveling around the domain, for various reasons, they would sleep under the open skies of the hard ground, often without campfire. Such were the ways of the steppe people. Ah, there! The hunter quickly but quietly pointed out to the right and steered his horse that way. Zora quickly followed, trying to spot the same thing he had. Sundok had seen a small hole near the rocky shed that was covered the grass. There will be foxes around, continued the hunter, and went for the higher ground beyond the rocks. When he got atop the higher ground, he just observed. Zornitsa was still following quietly, barely even blinking, trying to read his thoughts. Unfortunately for her, it wasn't so easy, because his eyes were narrowed, and his facial expression showed nothing. Do you think you'd be able to spot a fox or any small medium game in this grass? Quietly asked the girl. After the silence she couldn't tell what he was thinking, yet she was still eager to know. It appears very challenging even for the trained eye. Ah, but I won't be the one spotting anything, dear girl. Sauki will be, smiled Tsundoke and got out the small wooden whistle that hung on his neck by a small thread. He pointed forwards towards the grassland with his free hand and made a squeaking sound. The falcon ascended into the air immediately, knowing what was required of him. It only took him a few moments to get so high that the two horse riders had to pay very careful attention so they did not lose him in the clouds. He soared in large circles above the vast fields. Some time passed like that. The only thing that was breaking the absolute silence was the soft humming of the bees who were pollinating the flowers around, as well as the occasional squeak by Sundoki. Suddenly, the falcon descended with astonishing swiftness. "Oh, oh, he has spotted the fox!" cheered Sundoki, with absolute confidence in his long-time hunting companion. He had now leaned forward on his horse, had a wooden whistle ready in his hand, and was watching sulky, barely even breathing. "There is a chance of him getting injured during this, right? Aren't you concerned?" asked Zori, looking up for her uncle, who snapped out of his focus state and turned to answer her. "There is always a risk. One wrong movement and he could suffer a serious injury, get a broken wing, or get his leg chewed off. Sauki is seasoned though, and he has been in many times before. So don't worry, Zori, he will triumph," answered the hunter. "I was taught in the arts of falconry over 30 summers ago, and I have trained many strong birds. Yet he is the best among them, the most loyal and determined companion I've ever had the honor to hunt with," he continued, setting his gaze back upon the falcon who had nearly descended, maintaining the high speed yet looking very graceful and completely in control. The blonde-haired girl nodded, trusting in his words and good experience. A moment later, Sauki disappeared into the grassland. A sudden squeak echoed from the spot where the falcon descended, yet it did not sound like the bird. The whole grass around the spot was now shaking, and harsher sounds followed. Needless to say, the bird of prey had met the stealthy fox, and the brawl of life and death had begun. "He has struck the fox! We must move there and help him at once!" yelled out Sundoki, and tapped his horse with his heels. Without wasting any time, Zurnitz did the same, and both mounts rushed forward to the brawl field. As the riders were approaching, the struggle started to unfold before them. The jaws of the force were trying to bite off the claws of the falcon. The falcon had sunk in its upper back, yet the bird kept maneuvering and flapping wings upwards to keep away from the deadly jaws. Sundoki bit the whistle and reached out for in his saddle. He got out a hunting knife, and then, as they neared the spot where the two beasts fought, a moment later he jumped off the horse, knife in hand, as Sauki was still on top of the fox. He buried the knife straight into the neck of the exhausted mammal. There was no further struggle. The fox died immediately. "Let's see what we've got here," muttered the man, allowing himself a careful smile as he inspected the fallen beast. "Sauki will now eat the lungs of the fox. Our tradition dictates so," he said. He carefully opened a small hole in the chest of the carcass and let the falcon feast. A couple of minutes later it was all over. Sundoki cleaned his knife with the rag and tucked it back into the saddle. Zori got off her horse and went to see the falcon was well. There were a couple of scratches on the bird's legs, and his feathers were a little roughened, but overall he was in decent shape. The girl picked up a small woolen cloth and a small flask with fresh water and started to tend to Sauki's pouring water over his wounds and wiping the dirt and blood off. The bird of prey expressed his discomfort with a squeak. However, he did not move. This was not the first time when he had been tended to, and he had learned by now that it was good for him. "No significant injuries, just a couple of scratches," finally said Zurnitz, as she pulled away the cloth and the flask. He's gonna be alright. He has been through bigger struggles before and has overcome them. I will never forget the day a couple of years ago when we took down a wolf, a lone hunter, fierce, strong, determined. Sundoki almost lost himself in the memories. His voice started to get very soft, not something you would expect from a man hardened by his land. He snapped out of it a second later and went back to picking up the fox and hanging it over the back of the saddle. It was great honor for two of us, a great achievement. Tengri truly granted us his blessing that day. We made a sacrifice to him when we returned back to the settlement to honor him and express our gratitude. Now let's be off on our way. We have to try getting a bit more meat before heading back home. It will be expected, he added. Checked his equipment once more. Then Sudoku mounted up atop and whistled to Saki, who quickly landed on his protective arm. With nothing else to do here, the man looked around and said, "It's time for some shooting. Let's go." And off they went, northwards in the direction of the woodland. Another fraction of the day passed. By the party was now surrounded by thick trees and vegetation. They had ventured into the deep sacred woodland, a very important part of their natural habitat. The woods were always sacred and cherished among their people, and they thanked the Earth Mother for granting them some of their riches from time to time, always in moderation, always with great respect in return from them. For a grim fate awaited anyone who would dare to take with full greedy hands that which did not belong to them. The Sky Father and the Earth Mother gave, but they also took. All were at their mercy, none could change their will. "There you go, my good friend," calmly spoke Sundoka. He carefully ripped open the stomach of the fox and offered it to its falcon. Sauke did not wait for a second invite and started picking up his lunch bit by bit. They had left the horses to graze some grass and a small grass field nearby and were now well hidden between the thick tree trunks of ancient trees, waiting for a beast to come. Not too far away from them was an open area where they had placed for some forest fruit where they had come across on their way, the perfect bait for a passing animal. The visibility and range were great. A true shot would be a certain kill. Zori was looking for mushrooms as well as inspecting the moss. Some time passed like that, and although everyone was up to something, they were all very subtle about their doings. The wind was blowing against them, hiding their scent, and there was a small stream not far away from them near the open grass field, the ambience of which was just loud enough to cover their quiet conversations. All of a sudden, a noise came from the far side of the open region. The company halted their activities and sharpened their senses. A moment passed like that, but it felt like a whole eternity for the golden-haired girl. The seasoned hunter, on the other hand, had nerves of iron and kept observing, bow ready at his side. Two large great hares slowly approached the bait, sniffing the air, turning their ears around. Without uttering a word, Sundoku made a gesture towards Zurnitsa with his hand, suggesting that she should pick up her wooden bow. He slowly picked up his recurve bow and carefully managed to slip an arrow in. Zori tried doing the same thing. She was halfway there, adjusting the arrow, when she accidentally smacked the arrow against the frame of the bow. A noise escaped, and both hares immediately stopped and approaching it took a step back, getting down to the grass. Both hunters froze, barely breathing. Some time passed like that, much longer than any of them two would have wanted. At last, the curiosity and probably hunger overran the animals, and they slowly got back up and resumed their approach. This time, the novice huntress did not make the same mistake and prepared the arrow as intended. She was standing on the right side of Sundoku, who pointed to the rabbit closer to her and then stretched out two fingers out, pointing at both rabbits at once. By this time, they were already tasting the fruits. Sundoku carefully pulled the bowstring back, took aim and waited for Zori to do the same thing. The seasoned hunter took a deep breath and then just held it, as if waiting for something. Zurnitsa didn't immediately figure out what was going on, but a moment later, she realized that he was waiting for her. She pulled the string back and inhaled herself. Sundoku released and exhaled. The girl immediately followed. Two arrows flew with lightning speed, one after another, and dug right into the surprised creatures. Sundoku caught his from the side of his chest. Zurnitsa's arrows launched in the stomach of the other hare. Although not a perfect shot, it proved deadly enough this time around. The hares wiggled around and fell. "Well done, Zori!" cheered the experienced one, and went to inspect the kills. Saki was still picking up the inside of the togs. Zori went to inspect her shot. A couple of tiny mistakes, but don't worry, everyone has made them. I have too. So has my brother. With a bit more practice, you'll be just fine. He continued as he took the arrows out and picked up the hares by their legs. Thanks, Uncle. I'm sure I'll master the archery with enough practice. I hope Father will finally be a little happier when I do. Even though he'd rather see me take after my mother-in-law, said Zori in return, smiling and looking as charming as ever. I'm sure my brother will be happy, Zori. Now let's be off on our way back. We've got to process the furs, clean the meat and do some more work around the settlement. I have to talk with my brother and see how his meeting has gone with the Great Mother and the Senior Bragatur. Sundoke said, his facial expression and tone darkened by the word. I understand. I'm sure I'll have plenty of work to do myself, added Zornitsa. Let me just go around and have one last look around. I believe I might have spotted some parasol mushrooms around. She continued as she was going around the shady and moist parts of the ground near the tree roots. Ah yes, over there, she added only a couple moments later. After that she got a small dagger out and cut a few mushrooms that she saw coming out of the soggy dirt. She quickly picked them up and turned around. Sundok picked up the fox. Salki flew up and got on his arm again, and after getting the horses safely placed the carcass on the back of the horses, they turned towards the settlement and went on a steady gallop back. Chapter 3. Eternal Blue Sky. The sun was slowly setting beyond the western steppe, gracing the land one last time with its warm rays before it would give way to the darkness that would engulf everything around. By this time of the day, everyone had finished their daily duties outside of the settlement and was now back inside the yurts or around a few campfires that burned around. A few men, like the trappers and those who kept watch around all times, would go out far from time to time, but most avoided doing so unless it was necessary. There were other hunters in the steppe, and especially in the vast woodland not too far to the north. The great taiga was home to packs of large wolves, huge bears, and all sorts of other beasts. Almost all of the men preferred to dodge an encounter with such an animal if they could, and those who didn't share that opinion were considered daft hotheads who rarely lived to elderhood, for they often suffered an unfortunate death doing their duties, or early in battle. From time to time, young warriors ventured north to find a wolf and slay it, so they could prove their manhood and be regarded as equals by the seasoned ones. Taking down a wolf of your own or with your domesticated wolf or falcon was considered the highest hunting achievement. Bears were sometimes tackled too, when furs and meat were scarce, and more often when a bear had wandered down from the mountains and could attack the settlement to steal some meat or fish. In those cases, 2 or 3 hunters brought the beast down together. The riders used paths and roads when they moved through the domain. It seemed like the beast recognized them too, for they kept away from those busy routes for the most part. There were small yurts at certain places where watchmen and scouts from different settlements could come and rest before they delivered their news, or took care of other business. That way, if something happened, a rider could quickly travel to the next settlement, giving warning and news. The people from the other settlements could then ride down and help each other. They were all children of Tengri and would always stand by one another in support. So, how was hunting with my brother? Asked Abituho as he picked up a bowl that contained hot mushroom soup that his daughter had made after she had come home. It was very exciting, said Zornitsa, while putting her own bowl of soup down in front of her, and told her father about taking down of the fox in the fields and the hares of the edges of the taiga, where she also found the mushrooms for the soup. "'Tis a very good mushroom soup, I may add. Your mother has taught you well, and I've no doubt that soon you'll be able to cook everything the way she does," added the chieftain of the clan, and smiled at both of them. "By the way, was Kalia not with you today?" asked Vitho, after realizing that something was amiss. Kalia was the daughter of Sundoke. She was younger than Zunitsa, just like Sundoke was younger than Vitaho. Kalia was the daughter of Sundoke. She was younger than Zunitsa, just like Sundoke was younger than Vitaho. She was the daughter of Sundoke. She was younger than Zunitsa, just like Sundoke was younger than Vitaho. She was the daughter of Sundoke. She was younger than Zunitsa, just like Sundoke was younger than Vitaho. She was younger than Zunitsa, just like Sundoke was younger than Vitaho. No, I did not see her in the morning, and we didn't see her when we came back. Uncle did not say anything either. She must have gone out to train her wolf or to fish, answered Zrnica, after realizing that she had completely forgotten about her cousin. You know how she's like, always wandering off on her own, getting up to no good. The lass added with a cheeky smile. Just like you, right? Her father immediately added. A hearty chuckle escaped all of them, for they all know it was true. It took them a moment to calm down again. Sundoka doesn't mind our toothy friends, but I'm sure he would love her to get a falcon just like him, shared the Vidho, stroking his thick brown beard that was caught in a bubble. Or perhaps he would be happier if she took on a more gentle craft and left training and hunting with beasts to men. Speaking of which, you should do some leather working with your mother soon. We are going to do a few things together, said Voldoy, who hadn't spoken much until that point and was just listening to the conversation between her husband and her daughter. Next time you go hunting and bring back some furs, we should work on them together, she said. That shall be soon, yes? She added, giving him a look of expectation. I know it's been a while, but I have lots of things to oversee here. You know it's important, returned Vidho. He was aware that his family duties had fallen behind a little bit as of late, due to important matters he had to tend to regarding their security. Soon it should all be over and I'll be on the hunt for days. I'll bring a lot of furs and meat back. I know you will, father, said Zrnica as she got up. It looks like the night is clear. I'll go out and look at the celestial map above to see the Sky Fathers and our ancestors. Good! Hails to he who is the eternal blue sky, her father cheered. A short while after, Zoya was outside, making her way through the settlement. She saw families who were going around, completing their daily duties and coming together at dusk. To make the most out of everything, everyone tried to specialize at something so they could provide for their family and friends. Most families had a hunter, a trapper, or a fisherman who brought food. The fathers taught their trades to their sons. Some men made bows, spears, and knives, as well as traps, and others made canoes, wagons, even yurts, and everything else that was needed from dawn till sunset to make sure that everyone had what they needed. In turn, those who hunted provided them with fresh meat so they could feed their families. All men worked with each other and respected one another. Together, they had created a strong kinship, and everyone had what they needed. Most women stayed in the settlement and worked on the meat and furs that men brought. They had different crafts and took on the less physical work. Many of them would go out in the morning and pick up herbs from the steppe to use them for cooking, ingredients, or creation of medicine. Others would go out near the riverbed and collect clay, and then they would shape it and make it into pots out of it for storage of food and anything else. In the rest of the time, they raised the children and they made sure that they were tough. A few others took different paths. There were a few young Khams who were beginning to master the principles and practices of nomadic shamanism, totemism, animism, and ancestral worship. Their training and learning was overseen by none other than the Great Mother, who was the spiritual leader and the voice of the Sky Father all around them. A few others were travelers and wanderers, odd folk who roamed freely around the steppe and taiga. They rode around between the different settlements to bring news and reports, to trade and establish relationships, or to simply find their own glory and achieve their personal goals. Now everyone had done their daily work and it was time for the settlers to come together. Zori spoke to a few people around about various things and continued to radiate her positive aura. She was waiting for the eternal blue sky, the realm of the Sky Father Tengri, to darken and reveal its wonders, so she could gaze upon them and receive some knowledge. Standing around the fire near the center of the settlement, she waited for the last sunlight to be devoured by the night. It was finally dark enough. She started walking away from the brightness and warmth of the fire, so her eyes could adapt to the dark. It was getting a bit cold, but she was well dressed in a silken cloth that travelers had brought to her father from the western lands. Unusual piece of clothing to have, for no one made such clothes in their land. It was soft, comfortable, and light, but also more delicate than the levers everyone else had. As she was walking away, her night vision got better. She randomly turned to the side direction of the nearby hills from which she had a good views to the night sky. Suddenly her eyes focused on the top of one of the nearby hills, where she saw the Great Mother, quietly observing. A sense of curiosity sparkled in the girl's eyes. Zornitsa knew she shouldn't really disturb the elder, for the Khan would surely prefer to stand her watch alone, but her desire for knowledge overwhelmed her. Surely she would learn a lot from the elder, if the Great Mother decided to share some of her wisdom. Without thinking more about it, she started making her way up. The elder had sat down on the doorstep of her yurt, on watch, just like she had done during the winter nights so long ago, just like she had done countless times since. Tonight, she was sensing a great cut around, but some other disturbance. The animals in the steppe were particularly quiet tonight. It's like they were watching out for something, or someone. Several of the Khan's totem were beside her, all creating a powerful spiritual grid to keep the evil spirits away. "What are you looking for, girl?" asked the elderly woman, recognizing the figures who had climbed up most of the hill and was now nearly in front of her. Few who made the walk up to the Great Mother's yurt were not seeking answers or looking for something. Usually it was an advice regarding a particular situation, or a search for spiritual knowledge, sometimes even a blessing from the Sky Father Tengri. "I want to look at the celestial realm, Great Mother, to know more about our domain of our Sky Father and her ancestors who go to him," answered the girl, hesitating a little bit. "Have your parents not told you the stories of our people and our past? Our verbal traditions pass from generation to generation within each family. You do know that," stated the Khan. "Of course I do, Great Mother, but I want to know more," said Zornitsa, with more confidence this time. The Great Mother hadn't turned her away right off, which was a good sign. "Are our ancestors looking down on us from the stars above? Is Tengri there, and is he looking down on us now?" asked the girl as she looked up to the night sky. "Come and sit down, girl," said the Great Mother with a sigh. Although she wasn't expecting anyone, she wasn't surprised by the interest of the girl. "I knew you were not an ordinary child. I sensed your strong spirit coming to our land the morning you were born, and now you come seeking answers," the Count thought as Zornitsa came around and sat next to her. "Tengri is everywhere, girl. He is everything up in the eternal blue sky. Everything around us. He is in you and I, like he's always been and always will be. He created the sky and the earth," continued the elder. "Please tell me more, Great Mother. I want to know," Zornitsa urged. "When our time on this plane comes to an end, the Sky Father takes our cuts back to his heavenly realm. There our elders reside for a little while and watch over us. In time, the Sky Father sends our cuts back to this plane so they can be reborn further down our kins. This is the cycle of life and has been happening for eternity. You and I have been on this plane many times before. We've died, we've been reborn, receiving our old names from 2 or 3 generations before. That's the way it's always been," explained the Great Mother. "Maybe Sky Father Tengri favors us and has blessed us with you, Great Mother. Maybe he sends strong cuts to our land because of your work. I cannot think of anyone more attuned and more devoted to him," softly said Zornitsa. "Oh, I don't know, girl. I merely serve him on his plane. I do my duties, in his honor, and for all of our kins," returned the humble Great Mother. "Your spiritual guidance has changed our lives. No one in here can thank you enough for keeping watch over us, chasing the evil cuts away. You and your apprentices are the true heroes of our Sky Father. May he keep you around forever, returned Zurnitsa, watching the elder in admiration. For her, the Great Mother was a strong figure she could look up to, just like her parents and uncle were. People like that inspired her to be better, stronger, for herself and for everyone else around her. Then she looked back up, her eyes scanning the night sky. Do you think one of them watches over me? She added. If only you knew, young one, if only you knew that the brightest one watches over you, the light of dawn. You are the blessing of the Sky Father on this land, not me, the camp thought. Yes, somewhere up there, one of them watches over you, was the only thing the old woman said. Some time passed like that. The camp was still on watch, and was meditating with a heightened senses to feel the energies around. Although of age, she was still a very sharp woman. Zurnitsa did not watch, did what she actually had to do, and just looked at the colossal majestic sky. Her curiosity was growing more and more as time passed. She had always been interested and fascinated by everything around her during her childhood. Now that she was a young adult, her interest was even bigger. She turned to the Kam. Great Mother, how do you communicate with the Sky Father and our ancestors? She finally asked. It was a bold question, one that most would not dare to ask. Yet she did know that the Kam and her had some sort of uncommon, unspoken relationship. You ask a lot of questions tonight, girl. But I see that you are genuinely interested. So I will answer, for now. I leave this plane and transfer my spirit to another realm, where the Sky Father and our ancestor fly together, free, forever, explained the Kam. Can anyone do that? Was the follow-up question by the girl. No. And I'm not sure I approve of the direction that this conversation is turning towards, returned the elderly woman, with a slight frown on her face. She was anticipating the next question from the curious young youth, and she was worried that the daughter of the chieftain may go further than it would be wise. Could I try to connect with the Sky Father and our ancestors? Asked Zurnitsa, a bit more carefully this time. She was aware that she was treading on thin ice. On your own? No. With my help? Perhaps. At least you would get to the other side, but I don't think that's a good idea. The other realm is unpredictable, and many things could go wrong. It would be foolish of you to try such a thing. Besides, Tengri was not a personal god. He does not engage in dialogue, and nothing changes his mind. He commands and executes his unbending will, said the Kam, frowning more now. I'd like to try. I promise it'll be alright, said Zurnitsa, continuing to lightly push. No, girl. This is no game. Why push yourself through this? It's a burdening experience. Your parents would not approve this, continued the Kam. I can handle it, Great Mother. I just want to see my ancestors. I want to feel the presence of Tengri, said Zurnitsa. They both stood silent for a while, looking at the night around the dark skies above. The Kam was thinking what would be the best thing to do, while the girl was wondering if she would be able to experience the mysterious state that could be mind-opening. She's going to find a way to do it no matter what I do. I might as well help her and make sure that she's as safe as she could be, thought the elder. Then she returned to the girl. Fine, but it is your own responsibility. If you suffer, you shall be silent, she told Zurnitsa, in a lower, darker tone. Agreed, replied Zurnitsa, now looking more serious as well. The Kam exhaled and rose up. She made a gesture to the totems, that the tokens were awake and watching, and that no one else is close around. That was for the best. The fewer people, if anyone at all, knew what was going to happen, the better. The Great Mother only hoped that no one would come to her yurt to disturb her due to urgent matters tonight. What was about to happen was going to be private and only between the two of them. Not even the young Kams who were learning were allowed to do this when they were as young as Zornitsa was. This was something only experienced practitioners dabbled in. Yet fate decided otherwise tonight. "Come inside my yurt. This will take some time," said the Kam, gesturing with her hands to invite her in. Both women went inside and closed the door behind them. Chapter 4. Phantom Tower of Eternal Time. Now that they were inside the yurt, they both sat down on the rugs that covered the floor of the Kam's home. The yurt was slightly bigger than most, although nowhere near as big as a Vitohal's court. The insides were also different than those you would expect to find in most homes. There were a couple of rugs, even on the walls, that had scribblings on them. Other schematic ornaments could be seen around too. Different bones, herbs and tools that Great Mother was using for her work. They faced one another for a few moments. The only thing that broke the silence was the sound of the wind outside. "Listen carefully, girl. I shall give you an elixir that will send your Kut to the other plane for a short while," explained the Great Mother, with the most serious facial expression Zornitsa had ever seen from her. "You must focus, for you may have a pleasant experience or an absolute nightmare. Whatever happens, you need to stay calm and composed. Do you understand?" she asked. "I do. I will," replied the golden-haired girl. The Great Mother nodded. "Here, drink some water. Make sure you're fresh, because this will be burdening. I myself only do this when matters are urgent and I have to find answers to important questions. It becomes difficult with age. You leave a part of yourself on the other side every time you do it," continued to explain the elder, as she handed the young woman a bowl with water. Zornitsa listened to every word. She thanked the Kam for the water and slowly drank all of it. Looks like I do not have any left," mumbled the old Kam, as she went to one end of the yurt and looked at some of her herbs. "That's okay. It won't take long to prepare it," she added, and picked up another bowl, made of iron, in one hand and a couple of herbs in the other. She placed them in the bowl and started beating them with a spoon. That went on for a while, after which the Kam added a little water to the mix. "Start a smile fire while I finish with this, girl," she said to Zornitsa. She continued making the elixir. Zornitsa picked up a few dry sticks and a piece of wood that was stacked in one of the corners, and brought them up to the center where the fire could be lit in a tiny ring of stones. Both women did what was needed of them, and soon the small fire was going and the elixir was brewing. The night advanced a little more, and the elixir was soon ready. The Kam crunched it with her wooden spoon. The soft fire was left to burn, and the night was going to be cold. And even though the yurts were great at preserving the warm temperatures inside, the spiritual journey was often easier and with comfortable warmth. Zornitsa took up the top of her exotic mantle off, so she could be more comfortable. Both women did not speak. The sooner the blessed daughter of Avinhol went through the experience as safely as possible, the sooner the Kam could send her straight back home to sleep. "This is it, young one," the Great Mother finally said. "The elixir is called the Vine of the Soul. Remember what I told you, for the safe journey on your Kut depends on it. You should take one sip of it and no more," were the final instructions given by the elder. From this point onwards, it was all up to Zornitsa. Without further delay, the old one picked up the bowl and handed it to Zori. Zornitsa took it and looked at it, smelled it. It looked like dirty tea and had an old smell, but she wasn't concerned about that, for she trusted the Great Mother. She took a single sip. The taste was disgusting and she grimaced, but that is what she wanted. She quickly swallowed and immediately handed the bowl back to the Kam. "Now lie down, girl. Lie and see, hear, smell, feel, experience, the Great Mother calmly said as she moved towards Zrnitsa and helped her carefully lie down the rug on which she was previously sitting. A few moments later, Zrnitsa started feeling a little lightheaded. She looked around inside the room, darkening, and shadows jumping around the walls of the yurt. The world around her started to spin, and fog started to appear, engulfing everything around her. She tried to keep calm and focus on what was happening around her, without being worried. The fog engulfed everything around her, and her breathing became heavier. She couldn't see anything around, but she could hear ambience and voices. Zrnitsa felt weightless. Her breathing became slow and steady again, and she was taking in the whole experience. The fog was thick, but a path started to emerge before her. Zrnitsa got up and checked her surroundings. Crystalline sprites started forming in the fog, playing with the mysterious dim light that was coming from somewhere. They reminded her of snowflakes, only there were no snowflakes she had ever seen before. A tingling feeling of excitement ran down her spine, and she walked forwards. Slowly and steadily, she started to make her way through the mists, around the crystalline sprites who were all around her, illuminating all spectrums of light. She kept walking, and started coming out of the mist, finding herself in an ill-looking, almost otherworldly plane. There wasn't much around, and the little she could see appeared to be dead or dying. Not far from a single monstrous building that resembled nothing she had ever seen before. It was clearly man-made, and yet she didn't know of anyone who built such a thing. It was very lanky, swirling up towards the sky. Arcane energy and fog swirled around it, lit up by the light coming from the almost magically bright night sky. Everyone I know from our settlement could probably live inside, thought Zrnitsa as she eyed the gargantuan structure. Although she kind of found it uncomfortable, she kept walking towards it, for she was nowhere else to go. The light in the sky shifted and illuminated different parts of the structure. Now Zrnitsa saw an arched door on the illuminated different parts of the structure. She kept walking towards it and was nearly in front of the structure. For this distance, she could see that the door was wooden and had an iron lever. Uncomfortable thoughts ran through her mind again, but they were followed by curiosity that overwhelmed her. She carefully walked up to the door and used the lever. The door opened with a crack. The girl saw a dusty hole inside and entered. It was made out of stone, and the floor that was covered with paves. There were cracks in the walls, and the place was probably infested with spiders, bats, and rats. She looked around once again and saw a partially broken staircase that was leading towards what was probably the upper levels of the gigantic structure. There was but only one way to go. She slowly started walking up the broken staircase that was spiraling around the tower. She looked up and saw a few arched entrances around the staircase. All of them were glowing in different colors and were radiating some sort of magical energy. The ceiling could not be seen, for the mysterious fog was getting inside the tower from the cracks on the walls. The girl continued making her way up. A few steps later she reached the first arched doorway. Upon peeking through, she was expecting to see a room of some sort, but that was not the case. She saw a vast mountain range with spruce forest. She felt like she was soaring above the ground like the falconers of Tengri. There were people looking similar to the way her own people looked, but a bit wilder, less sophisticated. Their furs were simpler and their tools looked less developed. Zori turned over her shoulder and looked behind her. She saw the staircase and the entrance to the tower below her. Fog and light from the night sky outside were still coming through the cracks and were illuminating the dusty floor. She turned her head towards the scene in front of her. She was seeing the mountainous woodland. So, she was still in the tower, but not in the woodland. Things had not changed a little in the few moments when she wasn't paying attention. There were now a small group of men uh, was hunting an animal Zrinitz had seen a couple of times, but she had traveled to the eastern mountains with her people. It was a brown moose that was bigger and more furry than any she had seen before, and it was being hunted by men with spears. Maybe they don't have bows yet, thought the girl, while observing the hunters, who were circling the animal. A small group was taunting it towards two hidden men with spears who were going to ambush and kill it. The moose was in panic and was galloping for its life. Without seeming to anticipate the trap, it walked right into a spear that popped out of the side of a tuya tree. The weapon penetrated the chest of a beast whose anguished roar pierced the air and echoed through the wood. It jerked its body in a last attempt to free itself, but the spear was stuck too deep. As the other hunters approached, the beast roared one last time and collapsed under its own weight. Mayor could go to the Sky Father and may your sacrifice serve for good, thought Zurnitz as she moved away from the arched doorway and continued up the staircase. The wind outside whistled wickedly, moving the fog around the tower. Zurnitz stopped for a moment and listened to it. She thought she could almost hear distant, anguished echoes of apparitions that were likely haunting the tower. Looking upwards, she saw another illuminated arched doorway not so far ahead. She kept moving up the partial broken staircase that kept sprawling upwards and disappeared into the mist. She made her way to the next entrance and looked into it. She saw buildings everywhere. A vast settlement of odd-looking people, dressed in clothes similar to her own that she received as a gift from traveler returning from the distant lands to the west. The people looked kind of different, but just like in her own home, everyone seemed to be working together. Their homes were not like the yurts though. They were structures made out of stone that were shaped in odd ways and seemed to bear scratchings here and there. Zornitsa found them interesting, but also felt a particular discomfort just by looking at them. Her senses told her that she should probably stay away from such people, if she ever encountered them. As she found this particular vision less interesting than the other, she also found herself stepping back and continuing upwards, a lot quicker this time too. Her footsteps clattered as she moved. She could see her breath starting to mix with the fog around. It was getting cooler. Only moments later she was facing the third arch doorway. This one had different glow to it, and Zurnitz could almost sense a shift in the energies as she cautiously looked in. She saw a grassland, looking like the lands through which the boggers migrated, reminding her so much of her ancestors' land, but she was horrified. There was fire. The sky was black and the plain looked dim. It was like someone had severed the link between the Sky Father and the land. There were people fighting on the fields. She recognized the armor patterns and the weapons. Those were boggers, her own people. An army of them was fighting against what looked like a legion of foul, ugly humans. They were dark and looked foul. Their armor was weird, and they seemed to use trickery and cheap shots rather than fighting honorably. This could not be true. This must not be true. Her people were great warriors, and would easily defeat this scum, especially on home soil. The Khans were surely around to aid the warriors in battle. She couldn't see any, but she saw more and more invaders coming their way. Some of her people started retrieving, while others kept pressing forwards. Without the support of their brothers, though, they quickly fell to the Black Horde, who stomped on the bodies and ran towards the rest. Was that a defeat? Zornitsa couldn't even fathom what she was seeing. She tried to make some sense of it, but she refused to believe that that there was an even remote possibility that this could happen. Feeling of dread started running down her spine as she had started spinning. She rested one of her arms on the wall next to the doorway, for she was not sure that her feet would support her. Her head tilted to the side, and she saw the fog was thicker. More and more cracks were opening through the tower walls, and as few stones fell from the walls, creating holes thick fog started to go in, engulfing everything. A piercing scream filled her ears all of a sudden. The unknown apparitions of this plane that likely lurked around this place had gone hysterical. As her head kept spinning, she could no longer even see the walls of the or the stone stairs around her. The fog devoured everything. The fog started to devour her as well, and as she started choking and gasping for air, Zornitsa blacked out. Chapter 5. Banishing of Winter Spirits. "No!" shouted the girl and pushed herself off the floor. At first she thought she was in danger, but when she looked around she saw no fog nor bloody battle. Around her were the shamanic ornaments and rugs on the walls of the Great Mother's yurt, and the little fire in the center that had now burned out, though a few embers were still active. The Great Mother herself was lying down on the other side of the yurt. She appeared to be sleeping, but she was probably just taking a nap because she heard Zornitsa and immediately rose up to see her. "Welcome back, girl," stated the Kam when she came over to see how she was. You are all sweaty. You've lost water. Here." She added and grabbed a bowl that was quickly filled with fresh water from a bucket. "Refresh yourself. You need it," she continued as she handed the bowl to Zornitsa, who took it and drank it immediately. Only then she had realized how thirsty she actually was. The Great Mother did have an idea how she would feel after the experience. "Thank you," returned Zornitsa with a slightly shaky voice. She was still coming to her senses. The trip to the other world was wild and burdening, but also a life-changing experience. The elder decided to give her a few more moments. "So, did you see what you went looking for?" asked the Kam when she saw that she was well. "Yes and no," said the golden-haired damsel, trying to make sense of her vision. "I could feel the ancestors. I could feel their spirits around. There was this odd, monstrous structure where they dwelled." She paused to drink some more water. "I saw people in what looked like the mountains to the east. But they were simple. Maybe that's what our people were in the past. Or ancestors from beyond the great Ural mountains, perhaps," added the Kam. "I also saw different people from much different lands. They had huge buildings made of stone that they could not move like we move ours. Their clothes were different too. Although I find them interesting, I'd rather stay away from them," continued to reveal the girl. She exhaled and straightened her back. "There are other people on this plane, girl. Not all of them live in peace with the earth like we do. Some settle and extract from only one place rather than move and let it recover with the seasons like we do. We don't understand them, and they don't understand us. Such are their ways. Only Tengri knows why," explained the Kam. Zornitsa nodded. "I saw one more thing." This time the voice of the girl was lower. "I saw our warriors fighting another army in the steppe. The invaders were dark and foul. I saw our people die at their hands. I saw them burning the beautiful steppe. That was when chaos engulfed me and I saw no more," finished Zornitsa, looking down at her bow. She was expecting to hear an explanation from the Great Mother, but she did not receive one. Looking up towards her, she saw a worried grim expression on the face of the Kam. "Are you alright, Great Mother?" questioned Zornitsa. "No, girl. The Sky Father might have given..." "Are you alright, Great Mother?" questioned Zornitsa. "No, girl. The Sky Father may have granted you a glimpse of the near future. You haven't been told this, but the reason why your father has been talking with the warriors recently is because war is coming our way. We've started the preparations." "Our warriors are not afraid to get in battle. They have done this before," said Zornitsa. "But never has a force so dark threatened us in our homeland. The way those foul Sikh fens do. Not only they are a threat to our land, but to our very souls. They spread ill beliefs and spiritual shadow that corrupts the sons and daughters of Tengri and degrades them to false subhumans like them, continued the Khan. We've heard of others fall to their shadow to the southeast. You're truly blessed by Tengri, girl. It's an honor to know you. This is the only reason why I let you go through this, added the Khan as she turned around and looked outside her yurt. It was early morning and daylight was nearly there. It's my duty to inform the chieftain at once. Go home and get a bit more rest before the time for your daily duties comes, finished the Khan. Together they went down the hill. You are certain about this vision, were the first words that escaped Vitho's mouth after the Great Mother had come to his yurt, interrupting his breakfast, and had revealed to him the vision of annihilation. The Khan raised an eyebrow. Are you doubting the visions that Tengri sends from the other plane? She asked. Never, he replied without hesitation. I just need to be absolutely sure if I am to call upon the men and tell them that we're running into battle. I have to make sure I don't doubt myself. For if I doubt, so will they, he explained. This just confirms the reports that we've been receiving from the other settlements. Throughout the land, Tengri favors us and warns us. We need to heed his warning, the Khan explained. We knew we would encounter them eventually. The time is nearing. Indeed. Tengri truly favors us and we will prove ourselves worthy before him, added Vitho, and raised a fist towards the sky. Prepare your apprentices. Tonight we shall perform a ritual to bless our warriors and banish the evil spirits that can work against us on the field. After that, we shall meet them at our borders, commanded Vitho. It shall be done, chieftain, replied the Khan, and bowed her head low. Zurnitsa spent most of the morning carrying out the various tasks of her daily routine. She was able to get a little rest in the early afternoon before she continued her work. It took her a bit longer than usual, but she did what everyone asked her to, after which she dined with her family. It was evening again, and a colder one as well. As she and her family were just spending time together at their home, they started hearing more sounds from the outside. The people were becoming more active than they usually were after sunset. The time for the ritual was nearing, but although there was an important goal, it was also a great time for people to meet and share a drink. Zurnitsa enjoyed this particular ritual in which men participated. They would put on costumes with scary masks made of furs, bones and horns, and were absolutely terrifying. Then they would strap on big belts around their waists and would go around a big bonfire in the center of the village to banish away the evil spirits. The time is coming. Let's go, join the others, said the lord of the clan. Zurnitsa and Vlado did not need a second invite. They rose up and went outside. It was night now, and dark clouds whirled above the steppe. Not far away from their yurt, the people were gathering around an open area. Groups of men were already stacking wood around a circle of stones where the bonfire was going to be set ablaze. Vitho stepped forward and addressed his fellow boggers. We've gathered here tonight to perform an ancient ritual. The tides of darkness are coming from the southeast, and we shall face them and break them. I have no doubt that our unity and strength will prevail, but our fight stands tonight. First we shall receive a blessing and banish the evil spirits that may haunt the ground, and then, strong, cleansed, and focused, we will defeat the aggressors. Everyone raised a fist in the air and cheered. I summon the Great Mother and the cookers to start the ritual. And without delaying things further, Vitho went back to his family amongst the crowd. The Khan stepped forwards, holding a lit-up torch. She went to the pile of wood in the circle and connected with the wood from the different sides. There was some dried straw from the fields that quickly picked up the fire, and after the camp made a full circle, bright flames were starting to light up the landscape. As the fire started to emerge, distant sounds started to be heard from the other side of the settlement. Faces started turning towards the direction from which the sounds came in anticipation. The clattering was becoming louder and louder, and bells could now be heard too. Costumed figures that looked like they had come out of a nightmare started to appear. Costumed men wearing thick furs that were ornamented with bones, tusks, teeth, and anything else you could imagine started to make their way towards the fire. Their masks had humanoid features with holes in their eyes, nose, and mouth, yet they were monstrous. No wonder everyone was afraid of them. During the ritual, they were forbidden to speak. The only thing they did was jump and bounce around the fire. The masks did the speaking for them. The fire picked up, and a few people in the crowd picked up a couple of drums. They went around the outer circle and started drumming to encourage the cookers to bounce and dance even harder. The atmosphere in the whole valley changed. What was a quiet night turned into a wild one. As prime instincts took over, and the energy was felt everywhere. The cookers bounced, the camp chanted, and the drums echoed, and the people drank fairly potent alcoholic beverages. Even Sondoke and his daughter Kalia, who were considered sort of odd and not the most festive, were enjoying themselves. That's how most of the night went. The bright fire illuminated not only the entire settlement, but the nearby steppe too. Cheers and cries of happiness spread through the vast grassland, for it was going to be a little while until that happened again. The men were going to mate with their consorts tonight, to make sure that even if they don't come back from battle, they shall live on through their blood of their kin. Tengri was watching all over them from beyond the stars, nourishing them both physically and spiritually, granting them strength for the battle that they were going to head to. "The Khazars are coming!" shouted the man who rushed into the court of Vitho. "The Khazars are coming!" he repeated, shouting as loud as was acceptable. "What? We're under attack!" Vitho managed while jumping out of his bedding and started to put on his armor. He knew the situation had been dire if someone had woken him up in such a manner, and he trusted the judgment of his warriors. "Our scouts have spotted them not far away from here, during their morning patrol, chieftain. A large army has headed right to our valley. They will be here today," reported the warrior. "I will be out in an instant. Gather the Bagaturs. Tell everyone to prepare at once. Go!" Commander Vitho commanded as he picked up the weapons. Voldo and Zvonitsa were also awake now. Upon hearing the dire news, they started putting on their own combat garments. Avituho had thick armor that covered nearly his entire body. His weapon of choice were a big spear, a dagger, and a large recurve bow. He was going to saddle his horse and ride into battle. Voldo picked up a smaller bow and a dagger herself. Although she was a woman and women didn't usually go to battle, in dire situations she had to join her husband. Zornitz picked up a leather clothes, as well as a smaller bow and a dagger. All three went outside towards the stables to get their horses. Around them, everyone else was doing the same thing. The warrior code and procedures in such situations were well known. It wasn't going to be long before everyone was prepared. Avitoho mounted his horse and quickly rode to the nearest hill, just outside the settlement. He got up on top of it and observed the land. What he saw nearly made him scream, but he kept his composure and rode back down amongst his brethren. "I can already see the dark way approaching," he said with the most serious tone anyone had ever heard him speaking. "They will be here within the hour. We're going to fight them right here. There is no time to move out. The children and the young woman have to flee at once. See to your own. Instruct them to go, be safe and survive. Do it now," commanded Avitaho. After that he got off his horse and went to his own daughter. "Zori, my beautiful Zori," he started, hugging his daughter, who couldn't say anything. "You are ready. You need to go. Get on the horse and ride north, to the northern settlements, and tell them what has happened here. They will take care of you." But father, I fear for you. I want to help you," started Zurnitsa, but she was cut off. "This is how you will help the most. Survive. Be strong, and tell the others of what has happened here today." As he said that, Avitho took her to one of the horses and helped her to go atop it. Sandoki was saying the same thing to Kalia nearby. Her wolf was steadily waiting next to her. As for Sauki, well, it appeared that he was going to get an early release. "Father, mother," cried out Zurnitsa as she hugged both of them. "Be strong and take the heart down. I want to come back when all this is over," she said through tears. "We will be together again, my girl. Now, off you go," said Avituho. Zurnitsa knew she had to go and didn't want to make this harder than it already was. She grabbed the mane of her horse and went to a gallop towards the north. Turning back, she saw all the men mounting their horses and riding out. No doubt the other settlements in the area were going to do the same, as word was already sent. Make Tengri guide their arrows. Chapter 6. Magical Taiga. Zurnitsa rode swiftly northwards. Her horse was rested and she knew her way between the settlements. She could reach the next one by the end of the day if she kept her steady pace. It was a settlement that was located where the steppe ended and the taiga began. Beyond that point, the vast woodland and the mountains dominated everything as far as the eye could see. Time passed and she managed to cover some distance, but the girl couldn't help but look back over her shoulder. It wasn't long before she was far away up the valley and couldn't see her settlement. She couldn't see any of the other riders, for everyone had taken a different path. They couldn't ride together because they would have been hunted as a large group, an inexperienced one as well, and too many would have been a burden for a single outer settlement. Some of them would reach different settlements and try their luck there, while others would have to survive on their own with the skills that the elders in their families have taught them. It wasn't long before it was midday. As she rode, she neared a small brook. She stopped and decided to gather her thoughts while the horse drank some water and ate some grass. Both of them needed rest and refreshments. Zurnitsa carried a small pouch with them, from which she got out some dried fish that she had managed to pick up from her hole at the very last second. She only had enough for a couple of meals, but that would do for now. The snack was quick and the break was short. Both her and her horse would have enjoyed a longer break, but that was impossible due to the circumstances. She got back on the beast and kept riding on. Time passed and late afternoon rode on. The horse had slowed down the pace, but it was still going. Zurnitsa started to make out yurts in the distance in front of her. Not too long after, they neared the settlement and could now see it clearly. No inhabitants, nor animals could be seen. It looked like the settlement was now abandoned. Night was approaching and Zurnitsa had to sleep somewhere. She looked to the east and saw smoke rising far, far away. Another battle must have taken place there. She was wondering if her people were well and winning. Surely they would have fought the invaders by this time. She hoped and prayed that her loved ones were well. This settlement did not seem absolutely safe, but it didn't look like it was going to be under immediate attack either. She located the stable and left the horse there, with some straw that she found in the barn next to it. Then she went inside a nearby yurt to see if there was any food. Alas, there was none, and she entered another one, where there was some bread and a bit of red meat. She started a fire and quickly ate most of it. There were some buckets of water for her and her horse too. After she made sure she had taken care of everything, she lied on the mat and fell asleep. The night didn't feel long enough. Zurnitsa tried to get some sleep inside the yurt, but she was constantly waking up from various sounds that her consciousness recognized as possible threats. This area was unknown for her, and she was in someone else's home. For all she knew, she could be expecting angry inhabitants returning, or worse. The morning came and Zurnitsa got up. She had gotten enough rest to get through the day. She got out cautiously and looked around the surrounding area and and not identifying any threat, she stretched up and walked around with caution. While on her way to the settlement stable, she looked to the southeast and saw a red sun rising. A few black clouds were in the bloody southeastern sky as well. This was a bad, bad omen. It was like Tengri himself was bleeding and grieving for his fallen children. Zurnitsa's heart sank a little, but she had to keep her composure. Her father was a seasoned warrior who was no stranger to battle. She had to believe he would prevail. Her horse appeared to be well and rested. Zurnitsa went around the settlement once more. She was trying to find out what might have happened there. She was aware that the warriors had to go and fight, but she couldn't fathom why the entire settlement was abandoned. All of a sudden, her heightened senses detected something unnerving. She could feel a threat, and she trusted her instincts, so she started looking around. The moment she yet again turned to the southeast, she saw black figures on the horizon beneath the red morning sky. The tides of darkness were advancing through the steppe. "Sky Father, grant us strength," was the whisper that escaped the lips of the horrified girl as she picked up her pouch and weapons immediately, mounting up the horse and looked around. "Safety is primary. I have to escape," she thought. "The other settlements are likely abandoned too. The safest place has to be the taiga." She kept considering her options as she watched the dark wave thicken, ever closing on her location. She looked to the northeast and could already see the beginning of the mountains and the vast forest woodland in the distance. She knew there were people living in the lands to the north too. It appeared that was her best chance. Without wasting more time thinking about it, she turned her horse that way and rode off. Not long after, she was standing at the border at which the endless green wilderness began. Now was the time for her to set her loyal companion free. He was a beast of the steppe and would not fare too well in the vast woodlands. Zurnitsa cared about the animal and respected his health thus far. It was the right thing to do. As she dismounted her horse, she stroked his mane one last time. They looked at each other, and there was a moment of realization in their eyes. The golden-haired Dzvera started making her way through the streets, while the state turned around and galloped free through the steppe, carried by the winds of Tengri. Zurnitsa could immediately feel the different atmosphere in this new domain. The air was different, cooler, fresher. There was less light due to many trees that stood high above, and she could sense more wildfire than she had done in the last couple of days around the steppe. Looks like many animals had retreated to the realm as well, preserving themselves from the advancing threat. So far so good, but she had to keep advancing and find something to eat soon. She was already starting to feel a little hungry. She barely carried anything with her. It was hard to navigate through the spruce forest. However, she could use the sun whenever she could see it, as well as the celestial map above her at night. A while after, she found herself near a stream. She went to drink water from it and refresh herself. After, she inspected the area. There would be other animals coming here to drink soon too. If she could ambush one, she could take it down with a good shot and feed herself tonight. It was getting even colder now, and the water was nearly icy. Zurnitsa moved into the cover of a nearby bush, bow ready at her side. She waited patiently for anything to turn up. Some time passed like that, but no one came to drink. Zurnitsa could hear the sound of birds as well as other critters, but there was nothing else for her to hunt. She could feel the cold even more now as she was standing still. At least when she was moving, she was keeping herself warm. It was an unpleasant feeling, but she had to grit her teeth and stay focused. The only way the animals would not notice her was if she was to become one with the environment. The warriors of the steppe and the taiga were so successful because they had learned to hunt and kill from the wolves. A hunting pack would wait for their prey to feast on the grass for hours, no matter how hungry they were. Then, when the bellies of the deer or goats or whatever other animals were full, and the wolves would strike, unable to run as fast, on full bellies, the grazer's beasts were sure to fall prey. The hunt was always successful, and the long wait was well awarded. A tremendous amount of patience was needed, but she knew she had in her, for her kin was had to prevail her as well. Calm and focused, she kept waiting. At last, a deer approached the stream. The young huntress got excited because her patience had run out a while ago, but she had to keep her focus. Now was not the time to mess things up. The deer was slowly approaching and was looking around for a tiny danger, possibly sensing the scent of Zrnica, which was not of this land. It was evident that the beast was reluctant to approach the stream. A few agonizing moments passed like that. Finally, the deer decided it was safe and made her way to the stream. About 40 steps away from the bush where the huntress was waiting for her ambush, the animal lowered its head and dipped its muzzle into the water. Zrnica held her bow at one hand and the arrow in the other. Slowly and steadily she loaded up the arrow on the bowstring and positioned herself for shooting, kneeling forwards. The sound of the streamlet must have been quite loud, for the deer did not appear to hear her. The girl slowly pulled the bowstring back. She was timing her breathing and was ready to release the arrow. That same moment, another hunter leaped out of the woods from the opposite direction. It was a fully grown grey wolf. Zrnica was caught off guard and the deer reacted immediately. There was no time. It was now or never. Zrnica released the bowstring. Her arrow pierced the air, then sank into the mud of the stream. Zrnica's instincts kicked in immediately, and she launched herself off the bush and ran as fast as she could to pick her arrow up. She only had a few, so she could not afford to leave any behind. Quickly picking it up, she looked towards the deer that was now running up the stream, with the wolf right behind her. The girl quickly gave chase as well. The terrain was rough, so neither animal was running particularly fast. Although this was a chase of life and death, the slipping over and suffering a broken limb would spell certain death for any of them. The hunter and the beast were running fairly close to one another. Zrnica's boots gave her more stability than the paws of the wolves and the hoofs to the deer, so she managed to catch up and was right behind her adversary. This was not a race of two hunters who were both competing for the same prey. One was going to get the hunt and the other was going to walk away hungry. Failure was not an option. The pressure was on. Dodging sharp rocks, roots and nearby huge trees and fallen branches near the river, while keeping up the tempo, was a real challenge for all of them. The deer gracefully leaped above the obstacles, moving almost flawlessly in the process. The grey one was a bit more raw with his approach. He was cutting the distance as much as could by running over some of the branches, but still missing the stones around the stream bed. The huntress did a combination of both. Using her agility, she dodged most of the obstacles and tried to keep a reasonable speed. She carried more than the animals did though, so she was not as conditioned as they were to deal with the environment. Zrnica needed to end this, and she needed it immediately. She wasn't going to keep the face for much longer. As she ran, she looked at the area ahead and saw an elevated rocky formation about 50 steps from her. That was her only chance at this point. The wolf and the deer kept running and she felt herself starting to fall behind. Her heart was pounding now and the lungs were gasping for breath. Only a little longer, she kept thinking as she thought. She quickly climbed on the top of the pile of rocks and knelt immediately. The deer and the wolf kept their face in front of her. She only had a moment before the distance would become too great. A good shot, a very good shot, would do the trick. Upon getting on top of the rock, she pulled back the bowstring with the arrow and she eyed back the running deer. She held her breath and released. Tengri, guide my arrow, was the prayer that escaped alongside her exhale. As soon as the arrow flew, Zori jumped down and kept running. She didn't have a great view, but a moment later a loud cry of the deer echoed throughout the forest. Jumping over a tree trunk and dodging the next tree after it, Zrnica finally saw the animal falling down. Her arrow was sticking out of the upper back and was now covered in a line of blood pouring down on the coat, so she was very encouraged by her hit. But her happiness was quickly extinguished by the wolf, who leaped from the side and sank his teeth into the neck of the dying doe. Before the huntress could get there, the wolf started pulling the deer away and was now escaping into the woods with her kill. There was only one thing to do. Zunitsa stopped at the first opening she saw and immediately loaded another arrow. She did not want to do this, but she couldn't afford to let the wolf escape with the supper she worked so hard for. She shot a second arrow. The wolf, though, anticipated and looked like he had heard the whistling of the arrow as he split the air and moved to his right. The arrow sank to the ground where he had been a moment before. Zunitsa went and picked up the arrow. She stopped and slowly looked towards the direction of the wolf. The other hunter stopped at an elevation not too far ahead. He released the lifeless carcass from his jaw and stared at Zunitsa. There had hardly been a moment in which the girl had felt so helpless before. Both hunters looked at one another from the distance. It was as if the wolf recognized her effort and thanked her for the challenge. Zunitsa was not going to thank him back. It was a peculiar moment between two hunters. For as long as it lasted, the victor picked up the prey and disappeared into the taiga. A couple of tears ran down the cheeks of Zunitsa. Not only she got her kill hijacked by another hunter who out-tricked her, but she lost a valuable arrow. Such were the laws in this domain. This was no longer the steppe, this was the taiga, and life here was harder. She considered her options and decided to keep moving. Crying here would mean her certain death. She had to keep looking for food while making her way to the settlements to the north. She continued on deeper in the taiga. Chapter 7. White Death. Zunitsa kept pressing forwards. She had no margin for error now. Her stomach was starting to make sounds that worried her, but she had to keep going. As if her situation wasn't already bad enough, the temperature dropped down even further. The land was getting frost and it was still daytime. Zunitsa feared the idea of having to stay out during the night, when it would be absolutely freezing and on empty stomach. It had to be afternoon, judging by the little light there was. Zunitsa moved carefully through the woods. There were other lone wolves, bears, and countless other predators around. It was vitally important that she observed the areas through which she was passing carefully and covered her tracks as much as possible. Some time had passed, and she had managed to had made good progress, ignoring the tiredness. At one point, the girl stopped to catch her breath. She sat down and listened to the wilderness around her. She focused, picking up apart different sounds, and heard the sound of water. Could have there been another stream near her location? There was only one way to find out. She headed that way. Not long after, she reached an opening in the woodland and saw a significantly big river. She couldn't go across it, for it was surely too deep. If she tried to swim through it, she would get wet and would be freezing. It was alright, because this could only be one river. Her people had told stories of the great river to the northeast and how significant it was. She also knew there was northern settlements near it as well. All she had to do now was go up against the current and she would get to someone. She started walking at the edge of the woods, not too far away from the river. Some time passed and she reached a particular spot where the water from the river was flowing slower and closer to the shore. As Zunitsa went to the edge of the water and managed to jump on a couple of stones near the shore. Finding herself above the river, now she had to calm down and wait silently, just like she had before. She reached into her backpack and got a bow of thin rope out. She untangled it and wrapped it around the end of an arrow. Now she was waiting for a fish to swim past. Some time passed like that, and the girl started to struggle to keep composed again. She had to be careful not to scare the fish away, but at the same time she was fighting hunger, which was a fierce enemy. Luckily for her, the very shallow water around moved a little, and she picked up a silhouette below the surface. Without hesitation, she pulled the bowstring back and shot the arrow right in front of the shadow. She then pulled back the rope and was happy to see that her arrow had pierced the fish. Zunitsa grabbed the arrow and inspected the kill. It was a bream, a nice river fish that would feed her just fine. She pierced her head with her dagger. The fish didn't suffer and put it away in the bag. It was not idle, but it was nowhere else to put it. After that, she cleaned her arrow and kept waiting. Not too long after, another fish swam by, and Zunitsa did the same thing. This time she missed, and her arrow went into the grime covered that covered the riverbed. She pulled it out again, and decided to try one last time. The place was too exposed to spend too much time at. Again, some time passed, and she saw a darting shadow. This time she had to make the shot. Her arrow flew down at the release of her bowstring, and this time it struck true. Zunitsa pulled out a rope and followed a perch on the other hand. She did the same she had done with the other fish, and then jumped back to the shore. Now she went a little bit deeper back into the woods. She had to find shelter and make an improvised camp. It wasn't going to be long before it started getting dark. Zora was looking for any natural cover that she could find to spend the night under. The good thing about the lower mountains was there were a lot of rocks and caverns that she could use for cover, but it was so hard to find them when all she could see was trees and vegetation. Making her way around the greenery, she looked around for a sanctuary. Time went by, but she finally found what she was looking for. Her observation was on point, and she was able to spot a rocky formation. She immediately went to inspect it, and was happy to find out that it was a natural shelter. Around one of the sides, there was a fairly large hole in the rock that was that had almost created a hollow. Perfect. All hails to Tengri, thought Zurnitsa. She inspected the inside to make sure it was not the hollow of a beast, and to her surprise she found no indication that it was. The last thing she wanted to risk was walking into a bear's den or something of that sort. It was almost odd that a good spot like that was not inhabited. She left her backpack and bow in the corner inside and decided to pick up some firewood. She kept her dagger on her in case of danger. The girl started to inspect the trees surrounding her. The objective was to find a bowl of dry wood to burn, as well as something to start fire with. Not too far away there was a fallen tree that looked like it had been dead for a while, and it was fairly dry. Zunitsa went to it and broke off a few of the smaller branches. She picked up the wooden sticks and bowed them next to the entrance of the hollow in the rock. They were quickly separated from thin to thick, after which the survivor headed out again to get and do that a couple more times. In no time she had 2 nice piles of dry wood that would last her the night. Now came the difficult part. She had to light all that wood up with something. Zunitsa once again inspected the area surrounding her. This time not just anything that was dry would do. She had to look for birch trees. Although this was a northern forest, she believed she could find a lowly tree. It took her some time of going around the area, but Zori managed to find the birch tree. She used the dagger to chip off some of its bark. Now she had all she needed, and it was time for her to go back to her campsite. There, she reached into the back and got out a couple of magnesium stones. Her people had used them for as long as they could remember to create sparks and start fire. First, she laid a couple of rows of thick sticks just on the side of the entrance, so the smoke would go outside, but the fire wouldn't attract attention of too many beasts. Then she put out the thinner wood. Right on top of everything, she put out the birch bark. Now it was time for her to use the magnesium stone, which she held in her hands. She placed them right atop of the birch and smashed them into one another. They immediately sparkled from the generated heat. Zunitsa used the moment to gently blow on the birch, and as she carefully picked up and torched the wooden stick with it, smoke started to come out of the wooden pile. The girl kept blowing until the pile was lit up. Her campfire burned steadily. She got out the 2 fish that she had shot earlier, as well as her dagger, and went to the river that could be heard in the distance. There she opened them up from below the heads, from the stomach to the tails. Zori went outside and threw out their insides away from her hollow, so other beasts could eat them away from her. Now that she had 2 nice pieces of fish, she went back to the water, rinsed them off the blood, washed her hands, and went back to the hollow. There's nothing better than a well-earned meal after a very difficult day, was the only thought that was running through the mind of the girl, now that she finally got a break and could eat and rest properly. Zurnitsa woke up freezing and thirsty. She had become so comfortable around the fire after her supper that she hadn't even realized that she had fallen asleep. Luckily, she had been hidden. It was early morning and there was no reason for her to stay here any longer. Her goal was still to get to the northern camps and alert others of what had happened in the steppe. After that, she could probably ride down with the men and be reunited with her family. That's the only thing that mattered right now. There was no time for a morning meal. She picked up her stuff, drank some fresh water, and went on her way. She moved northwards, not far away from the river, ever pushing harder and harder. Something icy touched her forehead, and she halted to look up. It was snowing. That was expected since it was moving northwards, deeper and deeper into the taiga, and it was still winter. Losing track of time, she kept going. From what she had heard, the northern camps couldn't be that far away. Some of her people had covered the distance in the past, and surely she was capable of doing it too. Tiredness started to settle in, yet she kept pushing. The terrain became more mountainous, and she could feel the elevation slowly increasing by the changing of the trees, tree lines, and the air. Knowing that she is getting higher up in the mountains gave her confidence. That's where she could find the mountain folk, their distant cousins. Maybe they'll be able to point her to the right direction or help her out. Not long after, she found herself looking at an open area. Deciding that she could shoot down an animal here, she hid in the nearby bush and looked forward, taking advantage of an open area for a clear shot. There were no trees on the way, and she could surely strike a beast if no one came about. Strangely enough, she had seen less and less animals today, as if the forest inhabitants were aware of her presence and had alerted each other to stay off her path. Even if that was the case, she dared to try and take down whatever animal did show up. Unfortunately for her, as time passed, nothing seemed to show up. Avitho and Sundoki used to say that the most efficient way to get some food in such an environment was to trap. Zurnitsa did not have the luxury to try that though. Besides her lack of experience in trapping and ability only to create basic traps, she was on the move, and trapping required for her to come back and check the traps. Deciding that she had wasted enough time here, she decided to go to the next river valley again. Maybe she could find some fresh vegetation to eat. She had used a lot of energy the last 2 days, and it was beginning to show on her limbs. We're survivors. We've always been, and have managed to adapt to the difficulties and overcome adversity, thought the girl. Even if in this moment she believed that she was capable of great things, there was no turning back at this point, and she suspected that some of the invaders could have entered the southern parts of the taiga by now. Hopefully she would never have to find out. When she once more neared the river, she found a moor area where the air was very moist. There was lots of moss, lichen, and some berry bushes. Zurnitsa found herself picking up blueberries and cranberries. It was really not their season, but the chilling temperatures kept them well. They weren't much, but they would have to do. Something moved, and Zori managed to spot it with a corner of the eye. It was a hare who was likely here to eat from the same fruit as she was. The moment the animal saw the hunters, it turned around and fled. Zurnitsa picked up her bow, but she didn't do it quickly enough. The beast was gone. Disappointed at her latest performance, the girl started walking again. The day kept advancing, and with it, so did our little hero. It wasn't long before she started to get dark again. Hungry and exhausted, Zurnitsa knew it would be madness to keep pushing forwards, or try to find food in the dark. It was snowing even more now, and the ground was covered under a white blanket. Being pretty beaten up from the exhaustion and hunger, she decided to look up for shelter. Looking over the left, from an opening in the woods, she saw that not too far away were small hills and rocks. It was worth a try, and she headed up over that way. Upon getting to the location, she started inspecting it and found an opening within the stone plains. The moisture had probably carved a tunnel into the rocks over time. The entrance was no small hole either, it was in fact the beginning of a cave. The risk of entering such a place was great. Just as before, it could have been a deer's bend or the residence of a wolf pack. About 20 steps in, she decided she had gone far enough. The corner in which she headed to would keep her warm from the blizzard that was swirling outside, but wasn't deep enough to disturb any possible inhabitants. Zornitsa didn't even have the strength to try to pick up the firewood. She hoped the first would keep her warm enough. Resting herself on the cold stone, she shivered and tried to shake off the thoughts of freezing that were flooding her mind. It seemed to be working. Her mind and body adapted, and she started to feel less cold by the moment. She felt weightless, and all of a sudden, her vision started to change. The colors changed, and she could feel warmth and light around her. It sort of reminded her of the crystalline sprites that she had seen a few nights ago. Maybe she had eaten one of the ingredients of the Great Mother while looking for food. There was no way to know for sure. Her eyes started to feel heavy, and she could even feel her body anymore. Her breathing tempo was slowing down by the moment. Suspecting what was probably happening, she tried to keep her eyes open and stay awake. It was becoming harder with each breath, though, and it wasn't long before she found herself unable to stop the urge to release herself and give in to the night. The Sky Father had always watched over her, protecting her powerful Kut. Now it was time for him to preserve once more what's always been his. The Earth Mother had always nourished her body, so she can thrive and do honorable deeds in her name. Now, she was covering her up under the white blanket to protect her from the harshness of the winter and in the taiga. Zori went to sleep. It was dark and cold, and it was time for rest. Eternal rest. Chapter 8. Europa descends into darkness. Unease was spreading through the Bulgar capital of Fanagoria. The last couple of years were harder than the usual, and the people were really feeling it. The capital was different than the mobile settlements with yurts in which Zornitsa had lived. There were yurts here too, but the majority of the structures were made out of stone. The Bulgars in this part of the Khaganate had become semi-nomadic and had settled in more permanently. Because they could not move the structures they now lived in to more fertile land if necessary, they were now paying the price. Different people had different opinions on the matter. Some thought that the stone walls provided them with more security than the yurts, which just stood around in the plain and were protected by little or no walls. Others argued that the inability to move was a greater price to pay for such security and not really needed. In times, the timescale changed, and while some people were able to adapt, others found it much more difficult to leave behind some of the ways of their ancestors. Whatever the people thought, the ultimate decision in Fanagoria was the will of the Khan. He was the person blessed by the most attuned to the Sky Father Tengri on earth, and to disregard his will basically meant disregarding the will of he who was the eternal blue sky. Khan Kubrat was in his court. He was very aware of the situation his people were in, as well of the opinion they expressed. Messengers and scouts were bringing more ill news regarding the situation in the southeast. The Khaganate of Great Bulgaria was pressured by the tides of darkness in the form of the Khazars, the people from the deserts to the south. Difficult decisions have to be made, and time was running short. Stroking his beard, he was pondering the different possibilities and was trying to find a solution that was the best interest of the Bulgars. After consulting with a couple of his advisors, he called his 5 sons to the court. The young men answered the summoning without hesitation, and it wasn't long before all of them stood before their father. "My sons, you've come, and we've got important matters to discuss," he started as they regarded each other, each and every one of them. His kin greeted him, but otherwise said nothing. They too were aware of the dire matters in which they had to find a solution, so no one wasted any time in needless talk. We are being pushed from the southeast. The situation was hard enough even without the pressure that the Khazars added. We've grown to be more than this land can sustain, especially when we move less. For a while now we've been too comfortable hiding behind our walls. Things have to change, he continued to explain. All of his sons nodded in agreement. Badbayan, come here, commanded Kubrat, and summoned his elders before him. Yes, father, the young man replied and stood in front of his father. Kubrat stood up himself. He went around the high seat and picked up a single stick. Take this and break it. Yes, father, replied Badbayan and snapped the stick at once. His father showed no emotion in return. He just turned around and picked up two more sticks, this time slightly thicker, but not that different. Now break those, he instructed again, and handed them to his son. As you will, father, was all that Badbayan said before he snapped two in half and threw them to the side. Kubrat picked up a dozen of sticks, a thick sheaf of wood. He brought it before his son and handed it to him. You know what to do, he said and waited. Right away, father, said Badbayan and pressed with all his strength. A slight crack escaped the wood and the sticks bent a little, but not one broke. Badbayan was caught off guard and immediately pressed again. This second time there wasn't even a crack. Father, I cannot break them, managed Badbayan, struggling to maintain his composure. Exactly. I knew what was going to happen before you even tried. The wood represents you five as brothers and as rulers. Never separate your place of dwelling from one another, so that by being in coordination with one another, your powers might thrive, spoke the Khan, teaching his sons. This is the only way we're going to defeat the Khazars. In unity there is strength, and our bond must prove stronger than their chaos, he added. Yes, father, replied all five young men. Now off you go, said Kubrat. Go, experience, love, live, all of you, together. Finally, said Khan Kubrat and raised his hand for dismissing them. His children bowed and turned away to go, for they needed no extra encouragement. A while after they were all gone, the Khan sat on his seat again and looked towards the direction of which they went away. Tengri, I pray they listen, he quietly whispered. Later that night, the five brothers met outside of the capital. They had agreed to meet outside at a spiritual site just north of the capital, where no one could overhear them. The water of the sea to the south of Panlogoria could be seen reflecting the light of the north sky as waves slowly crashed into the distant shore. Badbayan, being the eldest, reached the site first. It wasn't long before the four brothers started to emerge in. Kotarak, Asperuch, Kuber, and Outsek all came on their horses. Now they could discuss what had happened earlier today and what would be the best thing to do. Our father spoke words of wisdom, as always, began Badbayan. His brothers nodded in agreement. But that won't keep our people happy. Their opinions change, and they become restless. We need to find a solution, he added. Maybe the Khazars will be convincing enough for them to come together, suggested one of his brothers. Maybe, but that unity will not be necessary to make the Earth Mother more fertile, so everyone is fed, like they were not long ago, retorted Badbayan with a silent tone. His brother went silent. He couldn't argue against that. All five of them knew it was true, no matter how much they wanted it not to be. Maybe it's time to move, said Asperuch, the third brother. After all, that's what our people have always done. Some of us shall stay here to defend Great Bulgaria against the Horde, but to ensure the preservation of our blood, others will venture elsewhere to make new settlements. where our people will thrive even if the ill tides overrun ancient home. He finished. Now they were all silent, looking at each other. Are you serious? Can you imagine our father's reaction upon hearing this? Besides, it will awaken us without a doubt, said Bad Bayan, looking at his little brother. I know father will not approve, and I'm aware that this will weaken our positions here, but isn't this reasonable enough? Do you have another, better plan? Asked Asperu, actually hoping that one of his brothers would come up with one. I have to admit that your suggestion does make sense, and unfortunately I cannot offer a better alternative at this time, Bad Bayan admitted, after he spent a couple of moments thinking. Do you three agree? He asked their other three brothers. After a short pause, other three nodded in their heads. That night, in the fields of Great Bulgaria, history was made, for their decision was going to change everything. In case that you four will gather those who agree with you and seek, like you and I, should take them to lands where no Bulgars has ventured before, guide them well, and make sure new settlements are made. Above all else, make sure the ancestral Tengrist strength of our blood, our heritage, everything that makes us who we are is preserved, said Bad Bayan. It shall be done, brother, but why do you only mention four of us? Asked Asperu, half expecting the answer which his brother gave him immediately. Because the oldest brother. It is my duty to stand next to father and deal with the threat here, replied Bad Bayan. Very well then, brother, said Asperu. Well then, we've decided. I advise us to all go back to our people and spread the word throughout the land. We're no cowards, so we'll tell our father of our intentions. After that, those who want to come with us are welcome to, he finished. The others nodded and turned around to ride back to the capital. The next day, at the center of Fanagora, the brothers announced their decision. Bulgars, warriors and maidens, times are dire and we have taken notice of your unrest, as good leaders do. Tengri watches over us all and hears your concern. We hear them too, and we have found the solution. Get ready for a great migration, because it's on the way, started speaking Asperu. Although not the biggest and probably not the most presentable, it was his idea. Bad Bayan stepped in. Those of you who want to stay in those lands till your last breath, welcome to defend it with your Khan and I, he said, turning to his father, who happened to be nearby. We're not leaving you alone, father, and although slightly separated, that way we're going to be just as strong, he added. Those among you who still want to move and find new lands can come with me. I've already heard rumors of a wonderful land far towards the southwest. Its fields are rich with grains, and its forests and rivers are full with beasts. Together we will expand the Bulgar territory and ensure the preservation of the Bulgar blood and our ancestral tradition. Who's with me? Asperu continued. A large number of people cheered. There are tales from brave travelers who roamed around the realm, said Kotshrak, stepping beside his brother. They have seen the prosperous woodland to the northeast. Although it's harder to find grain there, there is plenty of meat and fish and vegetation. The woodland will prove excellent protection against the spread of any foulness there. Any of you are welcome to join us, if that's what you want, he finished strongly, and his confidence was definitely felt by the people. Kuber and Nautek stood aside for a moment, just admiring the boldness of their bigger brothers. Those were the kind of men that the tales and songs remembered for countless generations and seasons to come. We'll venture towards new lands as well, they finally joined. We're sure our big brother Bad Bayan will defend and take care of Fanagoria and Great Bulgaria here. We shall go seek and find a road path of glory like our brothers. After taking a pause and regarding one another, they added, We do not know where the stars will lead us, but we won't stop until we find a land that will be good to all of us. Only Tengri knows. There wasn't a massive response like there was when their older brothers spoke, but a few heads nodded in the crowd. There was approval. Count Kubrat could not believe what he was hearing. Only last evening he had summoned his sons to encourage them to work together and be stronger for it, and now they were declaring that they would go their separate ways. It took him a couple of moments to comprehend what was playing out in front of his eyes. Although it wasn't what he ideally wanted his sons to do, he wasn't going to argue against it, for there was sense into it. The Bulgar people were known to migrate. They were semi-nomadic now, and were nomadic in the past, so it was in their nature. They would venture out to new ones and preserve the Bulgar blood and beliefs and share it with others. Many more would join the great family of Tengri that way. So be it, he finally said, his voice steady and firm. Come spring, you should make preparations. Those who stay will also do so. We shall make a stand for our current lands and fight the tides of darkness. They may believe themselves the aggressors, but they know not what the heights of the Bulgar strength can reach when it has to defend its blood and soil. It will be the last thing they will find out. The Khan's voice beckoned above all else. Oh, hail Tengri! Khan Kubrat roared as he raised his huge spear towards the eternal blue sky. Oh, hail Tengri! The people took the battle cry and it echoed through the land. We will face them all! Roared Kubrat. And so it was. Epilogue. Vladimir slowly approached the riverbed, pressing a clay pot towards his body with one hand and clearing some of the snow that was still left around the hills of the Balkan with the other. Although dawn was approaching, it was still dark and he had to be careful not to slip. Hurt himself was undesirable, and risking to damage or break the pot was not an option. Any tools and equipment were seldom made after the cleansing that had occurred not long before. The time of the unworthy, the destroyers, the defilers had run out of their era, had come to the end. The spirits of old saw to it, and the earth was cleansed, so pure, innocent life could sprout from the damaged world, so it can heal and start anew. Grabbing the pot with both hands now, the man carefully lowered himself, and he dipped the pot below the surface of the water, filling it in an instant. He then carefully pulled it out and headed back towards the small settlement that had been established. After meeting Irina in the hills of the Balkan over time, a few of the survivors had emerged from the woods, the mountains, and even the hills below. Although most of the world of them knew was gone forever, together with just about everyone they knew, those who were honorable and had strong haminja were deemed worthy by the spirits and thus spared so their children could thrive and be just as good as they were. With the population being normal now, it wasn't hard to find food for everyone. They didn't build massive structures, but rather small huts, shelters, and yurts, much like their ancestors had. Sustainability and balanced life were the top priorities now, and simpler life was the way to achieve them. Irina had become the mate of Vladimir, and was now due to give birth to their first child. The wind blew steadily and took the clouds with it. All of a sudden, Vladimir's light path got enlightened by the single brightest body in the morning sky. The sky to the east had started to brighten up a bit. Vladimir was on his way back. He had gone to bring fresh water to his mate this hour, for she would need refreshment. Her unease was felt as soon as sunset. Another woman had gathered to tend to her and help. There was not a whole lot the men could do to help. Most had gone to bed, so they're fresh for the crafting and hunting that would commence with daylight. It was up to the soon-to-be father to gather and provide whatever was needed. The wind blew steadily and took the clouds with it. All of a sudden, Vladimir's path got enlightened by the single brightest body in the morning sky. The skies to the east were becoming brighter by the moment now. He could see the light from the campfire and settlement now. The other smaller stars in the sky started to become dimmer, hard to see, all but the morning star, which kept showing him the way. Moments later, he was inside the settlement on his way towards his own shack. Upon approaching, he saw a woman near the entrance. She recognized him and held a hand up before he could rush in. Vladimir, wait! You cannot go in! Irina started giving birth shortly after you left. The other women are tending to her inside. I know how very badly you want to go in, but you have to stay here and let the woman get through this. She spoke to him calmly, seeing that he was nervous and wanting to calm him down and reassure him a little. Very well. I'm sure the women know what they're doing. Here, take this water, was all Vladimir could manage at the time. Without saying another word, he handed her the pot and went toward the campfire in the center of the settlement to wait things out and calm himself down. He sat alone. Naturally, he was nervous and worried. He had to kill some time, so he decided to use this alone time to just enjoy the silence, warmth, and loosen up. He lied down, not far away from the fire, and could look up at the night sky. Although it was impossible to stay in this position long, because the ground was cold and he would start freezing, he decided to enjoy the moment. Violet, red, and orange colors slowly started making their way from the skies to the east, as dawn had nearly come now. Few stars could be made out in the vanishing night sky, apart from the morning star, who shone as bright as ever. Vladimir's gaze was set on it. He was looking at it, and could almost feel it looking back at him. Just as the warmth of the fire warmed his body, slowly the star's light reached to him to light up his soul. Joy and relief ran through the man, and he lost himself in the moment, just taking it all in. Vlad heard a noise, and he immediately rose up. A couple of women came out of the shack and looked at him. He closed the distance between them immediately. "Congratulations, Vladimir," spoke the older woman. "You've been blessed with a beautiful daughter." She smiled at him and patted him on the shoulder. "You may enter to see them now," added the younger companion, who also smiled. Vlad wasn't going to waste a moment more. He gave them a thankful nod and entered his new home. It was small and simple, but it was all the new family needed. His mate was there, holding the newborn with both hands, and two more women gave her water and wiped the sweat off her forehead. Upon seeing Vladimir, they congratulated him and started making their way out. Irina turned towards him and smiled calm as ever. Slowly Vlad picked up his little girl and held her in his arms. Feeling overwhelmed with joy, he allowed himself a couple of tears. The moment seemed unreal to him. "What should we call her?" Irina asked after a moment. "We've spoken of this a few times, but we never really decided on a name," she added. Yes, I have," returned Vladimir, still finding it hard to speak. "Zornitsa. We shall call her Zornitsa. She is our light of dawn in those dark times, pure and innocent as the light of the morning star. She will shine brighter than everyone else and give us hope, even in time when there seems to be none," he mumbled through tears. "I couldn't agree more," said Irina, and also looked overwhelmed. Her mate was right. Dawn had come outside now, and the wind was gently playing with the first snowdrop flowers of this year. There was a whisper carried by the force of nature, picked up by the Balkan wind, carried through the Balkan woods, very faint and barely audible. It spread through the Balkan.
"When she awakes, the world will be